I never thought my own grandson would lock me out of the house I built with my bare hands. But that's exactly what happened last Tuesday evening, when the sun was dying behind the maples and the light made the windows burn like gold. "Grandpa, Mom says you should stay somewhere else tonight," he said, standing in the doorway like a nervous soldier. "It's not personal." "Not personal." That's what people say right before they break your heart. The air smelled of rain and old wood. My fingers trembled on the railing, and for the first time in 72 years, I felt truly homeless. I'd raised his father here, buried my wife here, paid every mortgage bill with the calluses on my palms. Now, a boy I'd once carried on my shoulders couldn't even look me in the eye. If you've ever given your whole life to a family and found yourself treated like an inconvenience, you'll understand what I felt in that moment. The silence after the lock clicked was louder than any argument. I could have shouted, I could have begged, but I didn't. I just stood there, staring at the porch light that flickered like it couldn't decide whether to burn out or keep fighting. Let me tell you how we got here. How a man named Tom Harding, a retired mechanic with a bad back and a heart full of loyalty, became an unwanted guest in his own story. It started months earlier, right after my son Mark died. Heart attack, 51 years old, gone before sunrise. The funeral drained what was left of me. My daughter-in-law, Melissa, kept repeating that word, transition. "We just need some space to transition, Tom. For Lucas, especially." You being here all the time might confuse him. I'd nodded, numb. The house still smelled like Mark's aftershave. I thought we'd get through it together. Me, her, and Lucas. Family. That's what my late wife, Mary, always believed in. But grief changes people. It rearranges their kindness. By April, Melissa stopped knocking before coming downstairs to the basement apartment she'd offered me, temporarily. She'd leave notes instead. "Don't use the upstairs bathroom when guests are here. Please don't cook anything with garlic. It lingers. Remember to contribute to utilities this month." Utilities. In a house I'd bought outright in 1989. She didn't know that. The title was still in my name. I'd never transferred it to Mark and her because, well, fathers don't imagine their sons dying first. I kept quiet, thinking it was just her grief talking. But then came the conversations behind doors that weren't as closed as she thought. "He doesn't even pay rent," I heard her whisper one night to someone on the phone. "It's like having another child. I can't move on until he's gone." Another child. Gone. The words hit harder than a wrench slipping from your hand. Still, I cooked dinner for them on Sundays, tried to be useful, fixed the fence, replaced the leaking faucet, mowed the lawn. Lucas would help sometimes, though he was 17, and mostly lived in his headphones. When he smiled, I saw a piece of Mark still alive, and that was enough to keep me going. Then came the day Melissa introduced a man named Derek. "Mom's friend," Lucas said awkwardly. He was 10 years younger than her, all polished shoes and cologne that could stun a bee. They laughed too loudly together. Within weeks, Derek's toothbrush appeared in the upstairs bathroom, and my tools started disappearing from the garage. "Borrowed," she said. They never came back. By July, she started dropping hints about retirement communities. "It might be nice for you, Tom. Social life, medical staff, meals cooked for you." I told her I preferred the quiet. She smiled like she already knew the ending. Then last Tuesday happened. I'd spent the afternoon changing the oil on my old Chevy, one of the few things that still made sense. When I came upstairs for dinner, Melissa was setting the table for two. "Oh," she said, startled. "I thought you were out tonight." "I wasn't aware I had plans," I said. Derek came in carrying a bottle of wine. "Hey, Tom, Melissa and I are meeting some friends. You don't mind eating downstairs, right?" I did mind, but I just nodded. Heat crawling up my neck. After they left, I sat alone in the kitchen. The air felt different, like something invisible had shifted. At 9, I heard a car in the driveway, Lucas coming home from work. I went to the door, ready to help him with his bag of groceries like always. Instead, he stood there, avoiding my eyes. "Grandpa, Mom says..." He couldn't finish. The rest you already know. The lock, the words, not personal. I spent that night in my truck at the edge of Miller's Lake, watching lightning crawl across the water. Sleep wouldn't come. Every sound, the rain on the roof, the crickets, carried Mary's voice in it. "Don't let them take what we built, Tom. Promise me you'll stand up for yourself." I whispered back. I promise. The next morning, I drove into town to see an old friend, Eddie Romero, my former coworker from the auto shop. He'd retired early, turned half his garage into a side hustle flipping properties. When I told him what happened, he whistled low. "Tom, you still got the deed to that house, right?" "Of course I do." He leaned forward. "Then maybe it's time to remind them whose name is on it." I laughed bitterly. "What am I going to do, kick my grandson out?" Eddie's eyes hardened. "You raised a son who would have never locked you out. Maybe it's time to teach his widow what respect costs." I left his place with something burning in my chest. I wasn't sure if it was anger or courage, maybe both. I stopped by the courthouse, asked about property records. The clerk printed them out. There it was, clear as daylight. Thomas Harding, sole owner, no transfer, no co-signer, nothing. Standing there under the fluorescent lights, I felt a strange calm. For the first time in months, I wasn't the helpless old man in the basement. I was the builder, the provider, the man who'd carried his family on his back through decades of sweat and sacrifice. That evening, I parked my truck across the street from my own house and watched through the living room window. Melissa was laughing with Derek, sipping wine, the glow of the television bouncing off their glasses. Lucas sat on the couch, expression blank. He looked tired, maybe guilty, maybe both. I didn't go to the door, not yet. Some storms need to gather before they break. Tomorrow, I'd make some calls, to a lawyer, to a realtor, maybe even to Eddie again. Because I was done being the quiet man in the basement. And when the dust settled, they were going to learn the same lesson my wife once taught me. Never mistake kindness for weakness. I woke before dawn, the sky still bruised from night. There's something about age that steals your sleep but sharpens your clarity. I sat at the edge of the bed, holding the deed in my hands like scripture. My name was there in black ink. Thomas Harding, 1989. Mary's handwriting on the witness line, faded but still alive. I whispered to her photo on the nightstand. "You built this place with me. You trusted I'd protect it. I won't fail you now." The house looked different from the curb that morning. The flowers I'd planted around the mailbox were wilted. The porch paint I'd touched up last summer had started peeling again. Maybe it wasn't just the wood that was tired. Maybe it was me. But when I thought of Melissa's laughter echoing through my living room, something inside me snapped back into focus. I drove straight to Eddie Romero's garage. He was under a car, oil dripping onto his coveralls. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, sliding out and wiping his hands. "Never could when something's unfinished," I said, holding up the deed. Eddie squinted at it. "Still clean. You could sell that house tomorrow if you wanted." "I don't want to sell," I said slowly. "I want to decide who lives in it." He grinned. "Then you'll need a lawyer, someone who knows how to play hardball without you breaking a sweat." That's how I met Clara Jennings, a sharp-eyed real estate attorney who looked too young to understand men like me, until she started talking. "So," she said, scanning the document, "you bought the house outright. No joint ownership, no life estate transfers. You are, in every legal sense, the landlord." Landlord? The word tasted strange. "They're family." She looked up, her tone gentler. "Family or not, they're occupants without a lease. If you wanted, you could ask them to leave immediately." I rubbed my face. "Melissa's raising my grandson there." Clara folded her hands. "Mr. Harding, I've seen too many good men lose everything because they confuse guilt with love. You don't owe anyone your home." She handed me a form. "This is a notice of possession. You're not evicting anyone yet. You're just reasserting ownership. A quiet reminder that the roof over their heads exists because of you." I left her office with that paper folded in my pocket, my hands shaking not from weakness, but from power I'd forgotten I still had. The drive home felt longer than usual. Every mile was another memory. Mary painting the porch, Mark learning to ride his bike, Lucas chasing fireflies barefoot in the yard. It all belonged to me, yet somehow I'd been living like a ghost among my own memories. When I turned onto Maple Avenue, Derek's truck was parked in the driveway. Again. The sight of it made my jaw clench. I parked across the street, took a deep breath, and walked up to the front door. Before I could knock, Lucas opened it. His eyes were red-rimmed, like he hadn't slept. "Grandpa," he whispered, stepping outside, "Mom said you shouldn't come here. Then why are you opening the door? He hesitated. Because I wanted to. For a moment, I saw the little boy he used to be, the one who'd sit on my lap while I read him car manuals like bedtime stories. I reached into my pocket and handed him the paper. What's this? Proof, I said quietly, that this house is still ours. He unfolded it, frowning. I don't get it. It means your grandpa's not a guest here, I said. And if your mother wants to forget that, she's about to get a reminder. Just then, the front door swung open. Melissa stood there, a coffee mug in hand, wearing a robe that wasn't hers, Derek's. Tom, she said coolly, I thought I made myself clear last week. You did, I said, but clarity's a two-way street. I held out the paper. She took it, skimmed it, and laughed, an ugly hollow sound. Really? You're pulling paperwork on your family? I'm protecting what's mine. She handed it back. You think this changes anything? Mark left this house to us. He never changed the deed, I said. You might want to check the records before you build your future on someone else's foundation. For the first time, her smile faltered. You wouldn't actually... I would, I said, voice steady. And I am. You've got until the end of the month to figure out your next move. Her mug hit the porch railing hard enough to crack. You're bluffing? I turned toward my truck. You've mistaken silence for surrender, Melissa. That was your first mistake. As I drove off, I caught sight of Lucas still standing in the doorway, the notice in his hand, confusion, and something like pride flickering in his eyes. The next few days were quiet, too quiet. I stayed at Eddie's spare apartment, sleeping on a pull-out couch that smelled faintly of motor oil and comfort. I half expected Melissa to call, to yell, to threaten lawyers, but she didn't. The silence unnerved me. On Friday afternoon, Clara called. Mr. Harding, your daughter-in-law came by my office. My stomach dropped. What did she say? She wanted to discuss options. Tried to charm me, actually. Mentioned selling the property and splitting proceeds. I laughed bitterly. Split what she never owned? That's what I told her, Clara said. Then she changed tactics, offered to buy the house from you outright. My hand tightened on the phone. With what money? Her boyfriend's, apparently. A cash offer. Below market value, of course. I was quiet for a long moment. Clara, I said finally, if she wants to buy my house, then she can go through the proper channels, as any buyer would. You're sure about this? More than I've ever been sure of anything. That evening, I drove back to Maple Avenue, parking across from the house again. The porch light was off this time. I sat there watching the windows glow faintly with television light. It wasn't anger I felt anymore. It was sadness, deep and heavy. Families fall apart slowly, like paint peeling in the rain. You don't notice the damage until one day the wood's already rotted through. Then, through the living room window, I saw something that froze my blood. Derek was holding a folder, the same manila color as the property records I'd printed. Melissa leaned over his shoulder, whispering something. He pointed to a line on the page, smirking. They'd somehow gotten my copies, or forged new ones. That's when I realized this wasn't just disrespect. It was strategy. They were planning something bigger. I turned the key in the ignition, adrenaline burning through the years in my veins. All right, Mary, I muttered. You wanted me to stand up for myself. Time to stand. Because this fight wasn't about a house anymore. It was about legacy, and I wasn't about to let mine end with a locked door. There's a sound a man never forgets. The hollow creak of his own porch when he's no longer welcome on it. That sound followed me even in sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lucas standing there in that doorway, his face caught between guilt and obedience. That's what haunted me more than Melissa's words, not her cruelty, but the thought that my grandson had learned it. For a few days I tried to keep my head down, fix things in Eddie's garage, drink burnt coffee, pretend I didn't care that my life was boxed up in someone else's living room. But truth has a way of humming in the background until you can't ignore it anymore. Saturday morning, I called Clara. You said Melissa offered to buy the house, I began. Did she mention who her financier was? Not by name, she said, but the offer letter she left. It's on letterhead for something called D&H Property Solutions. Sounds corporate, but I couldn't find any record of it. Derek and Harding, I said quietly. She's using my own last name in the shell company. There was a pause. That's bold, Clara muttered. No, I said. That's stupid, because now I know how far they're willing to go. Eddie walked in mid-call, grease on his hands, a sandwich in his mouth. You look like a man who just bit a lemon, he said. I'm about to serve someone the same, I replied. We spent the afternoon digging. Eddie had friends at the county office, guys who owed him favors from his mechanic days. By sundown, we'd found what I was afraid of, a preliminary listing request. Melissa and Derek had tried to list my house, for sale under D&H Property Solutions, claiming to represent the estate of the late Mark Harding. The audacity of it almost made me laugh. Almost. Eddie whistled low. They're not just trying to push you out, Tom. They're trying to erase you completely. I looked at the printout, my throat tightening. Not if I erase their plan first. That night, I drove to Maple Avenue. The street was quiet except for the hum of sprinklers and the far-off whine of a train. I parked across the street again, lights off. My house stood there like a stranger wearing my skin. Curtains drawn, windows glowing blue from the TV. Derek's truck was gone. Good. I walked up the driveway, the gravel crunching under my boots. Every step felt like walking through time. I wasn't there to break anything. Not yet. I just needed evidence. The side door to the garage was still jammed like it had been since Mark's teenage years. A good shove, and it opened. My tools, what was left of them, hung neatly on the wall. Derek had organized them like trophies. I found the old metal lockbox where I used to keep spare keys, papers, and small cash for emergencies. The latch was bent, forced open. Inside, only dust and a faint smell of gasoline. Someone had tried to make it look like I'd left a mess behind. Maybe to claim I'd abandoned the property voluntarily. Maybe to make me look senile. Either way, it was sloppy. I pulled out my phone and took photos. Every corner, every mark. Evidence. If they wanted to fight dirty, I'd fight smart. As I turned to leave, headlights flashed across the driveway. I ducked behind the old riding mower just as a car pulled up. Melissa stepped out, phone pressed to her ear, her voice sharp in the quiet night. Yes, the appraisal's scheduled for Tuesday, she said. Don't worry, he's out of the picture. The old man's practically gone. My chest went cold. She paused, listening, then laughed softly. Derek, relax. Even if he shows up, he can't prove anything. The lawyer said the deed might be contested because of Mark's death. We'll say Tom was mentally unstable. There's paperwork from the doctor, remember? Doctor? What paperwork? My hand tightened around my phone, recording every word. When she finally went inside, I slipped back into the shadows and walked to my truck, heart hammering. The smell of gasoline still clung to my hands, and for a moment it felt like a warning, something volatile waiting for a spark. The next morning, I met Clara again. She listened to the recording, her eyes narrowing. Fake medical documents, false estate filings, that's criminal fraud, Mr. Harding. I don't want them in jail, I said quietly. I just want my home back. She folded her arms. You might get both. She drafted what she called a protective ownership petition, a legal blockade that would freeze any sale or transfer of the property until the authenticity of the ownership could be verified. Once it was filed, any buyer, agent, or bank involved would be legally obligated to back off. As she slid the papers across the desk, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Control. Once this is stamped, she said, they won't be able to move an inch without your signature. I smiled, slow and tired. Then let's give them enough rope to hang themselves first. That weekend, I called Lucas. He didn't answer the first 2 times, but finally on Sunday evening, my phone buzzed. Grandpa? Hey, kiddo, I said gently. How's school? There was a pause. Mom says you're trying to sell the house. I exhaled. She's lying, Lucas. She's trying to sell it herself. He didn't speak for a while, then softly, I don't know who to believe. I swallowed hard. Then come see for yourself. I've got proof. He hesitated. If Mom finds out, she doesn't have to. Finally, he whispered, tomorrow after work. That night, I barely slept. When dawn came, the fog lay low over Miller's Lake like smoke from an old fire. I waited at the diner near his school, 2 coffees steaming between us. He arrived looking older than his 17 years, dark circles, slumped shoulders. I slid the recordings across the table. Then the documents Clara had filed. He listened, silent, pale. When Melissa's voice came through the speaker, the old man's practically gone. His jaw tightened. "She lied to me," he said, voice shaking. "She lied to both of us," I said. "But you don't have to follow her down that road." For a while he just stared at his hands. Then he said something that broke me a little. "I thought you left because you didn't want to be here anymore." I shook my head. "I left because I wanted you to have a choice someday." We sat there until the coffee went cold. Before he left, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small key. "I found this in Mom's drawer," he whispered. "It's a storage unit receipt with your name on it. Thought you might want it back." "Where?" "Corner of 5th and Maynard." After he left, I drove straight there. The unit was dusty, cold, filled with boxes marked Tom, Personal. But what caught my eye was a single black duffel bag sitting on top. Inside were papers, old financial statements, insurance documents, and at the bottom, something that made my hands tremble. A letter from Mark, dated a week before his death. "Dad," it read, "I know you've been thinking about transferring the house to me, but please don't. Keep it in your name until Lucas is grown. You're the only one I trust to protect it. If anything happens to me, don't let Melissa push you out. She's not who she pretends to be." I sat there for a long time, the words blurring. When I finally stood, my reflection in the metal door looked harder, older, alive again. By the time I left the storage unit, I had a plan. I called Clara. "File whatever you need to," I said. "And one more thing, find me a realtor, the kind who doesn't flinch at family drama." "You're selling?" she asked, startled. "Oh, I'm selling," I said. "Just not to them. Because if Melissa wanted to profit off my house, she was about to learn what it felt like to see a sold sign she didn't expect. And that's when I smelled it again. The faint, oily scent clinging to my clothes from the garage. Gasoline. It wasn't just symbolic anymore. Something was burning, and this time, I was the one holding the match. When I was a boy, my father used to say, "Tommy, a man's temper is like gasoline. Burns hot, burns fast, and if you don't watch the wind, it'll take you with it." I didn't really understand that until the night I decided to burn everything down, figuratively anyway. The letter from Mark sat on the kitchen table of Eddie's garage apartment, weighted down by my coffee mug. I'd read it at least a dozen times since finding it in that storage unit. His handwriting, the same slanted scrawl from his childhood homework, felt like he was talking to me again. "Keep it in your name until Lucas is grown." That was my marching order. Not revenge, not bitterness. Just one last job as a father. Monday morning, I called Clara. "Tell your realtor friend I'm ready," I said. She hesitated. "You're sure you want to sell?" "I'm sure I don't want Melissa to live there another week pretending it's hers." The realtor's name was Maggie Flynn, a small, quick woman with sharp eyes and a voice that could cut glass. We met at a coffee shop near City Hall. "I've handled messy sales before," she said, opening her tablet. "But family disputes? Those get vicious." I smiled thinly. "Good. I need someone who doesn't scare easy." We arranged everything that afternoon, discreet listing, private showings, cash buyers only. Eddie nearly choked on his sandwich when I told him. "You're selling out from under them?" "Not exactly," I said. "I'm selling what's mine. If they want to stay, they can buy it fair and square, alongside everyone else." He laughed, shaking his head. "You always were a stubborn old mule." "Call it consistency," I said. The first showing was scheduled for Thursday. Maggie warned me Melissa would find out quickly, neighbors talk. "Let her," I said. "She's been whispering lies long enough. Time she heard the truth in her own driveway." By Wednesday evening, the gossip had already reached her. At exactly 7:12 p.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number, but I knew that tone before she even spoke. "How dare you?" she hissed. "You think you can humiliate me like this, selling the house out from under us?" "You've been selling it out from under me for weeks," I said calmly. Her voice rose. "I took care of your son, of this family. You took care of yourself, Melissa. You ungrateful." I hung up before she finished. I'd heard enough of her definitions of gratitude. That night, I drove by the house again. The porch light was off, but Lucas's bedroom window was glowing faintly. For a second, I saw movement, a silhouette leaning out, phone in hand. Then a text buzzed in. "She's freaking out. Derek's yelling too. What should I do?" I typed back slowly. "Stay calm, kid. Let the truth do the shouting." The next morning, the world tilted. When Maggie and I arrived at the property for the first showing, the front door was already open. The lock had been forced. Inside, the living room looked like a storm had passed through. Drawers open, papers scattered, my framed photos on the floor. But what made Maggie curse wasn't the mess. It was the smell. Gasoline. She yanked her sleeve over her mouth. "Good God, Tom!" I moved faster than I'd moved in years, throwing open windows, checking rooms. The odor was thickest in the kitchen. 2 empty cans lay by the door. Whoever did this hadn't lit a match yet, but they'd wanted to. On the counter, a note. "Leave us alone, or next time it won't be a warning." Maggie's eyes were wide. "You think she—" "I don't think," I said, voice steady. "I know." The police came, took statements, photographed everything. The officer, a young guy named Mills, looked skeptical. "You sure your daughter-in-law would do something like this, sir? Seems extreme." I handed him my phone. "Play the recording." He listened, expression hardening as Melissa's voice filled the room. "The old man's practically gone. Even if he shows up, we'll say he's unstable." When it ended, he let out a slow breath. "I'll make sure this goes in the report." As they left, Maggie turned to me. "You still want to sell?" I nodded. "More than ever?" By noon, the listing went live under Maggie's private network. Within hours, 3 investors had called, interested in a quick cash deal. The first offer came in above asking price. I almost smiled. Almost. That evening, Lucas showed up at Eddie's garage, pale and nervous. "Mom's losing it," he said, pacing. "She thinks you're trying to destroy her." "I'm not," I said. "She's doing that herself." He sat down heavily. "Derek's the one who poured the gas. I heard them fighting about it. She told him he was an idiot." "Did you tell the police?" He shook his head. "I can't. She's still my mom." I looked at him for a long time. "You're a good kid, Lucas, but sometimes good people have to tell hard truths." He ran a hand through his hair. "What happens when she finds out you're selling?" I leaned back. "Then she'll learn the difference between owning something and belonging to it." 2 days later, she found out. I was in Clara's office when the storm hit. The receptionist looked terrified as Melissa burst through the door, Derek on her heels. She was trembling, not from fear, but from rage. "You manipulative old man," she shouted. "You think you can steal my home?" I stood. "My home. You were guests, not heirs." "Mark wanted me to have it." "Mark wrote me a letter before he died," I said evenly. "You want to see it?" That stopped her. Her lips parted, color draining from her face. "You're lying." I pulled the folded page from my pocket and laid it on the desk. "He trusted me to keep this place safe until Lucas is grown. That's what I'm doing." She reached for it, but Clara's hand shot out first. "Touch that, and I'll have you removed." Derek stepped forward, puffed up like a rooster. "You don't scare us, old man. You think buyers will touch a property with a police report attached?" I smiled. "They already did. Contracts being signed this afternoon." Melissa's jaw dropped. "You... what?" "You wanted to sell it for profit," I said. "Congratulations. You just did. Only difference is, none of it's yours." For a moment, she was speechless. Then she laughed, brittle and sharp. "You'll regret this, Tom. You think money makes you win, but you'll die alone in some garage while we move on." I looked at her calmly. "At least I'll die honest." She stormed out, Derek slamming the door behind her so hard the glass rattled. The room was quiet for a long time after. Clara let out a breath. That woman could set fire to rain. "She already tried," I muttered. That night, Lucas came by again. He looked tired, but calmer. "Mom's packing," he said. "Said we're moving in with Derek." "Good," I said softly. "Maybe distance will do what decency couldn't." He hesitated, then looked at me. "What about me, Grandpa? When you sell the house, where will you go?" I smiled. "Wherever I want. Freedom's a funny thing. It fits in your pocket once you stop being afraid of losing it. He nodded, and for the first time since all this began, he hugged me. I'm sorry for what I said that night. I squeezed his shoulder. You didn't say it. You just carried someone else's words. The next morning, the deal closed. Cash buyer, full price, no contingencies. The bank transfer cleared before lunch. I drove by the house one last time. The windows were dark, the porch empty. I stood by the mailbox and ran my fingers over the rusted numbers, 3x17 maple, and felt peace, not loss. When I turned to leave, a moving truck pulled up. A middle-aged woman stepped out, smiling shyly. Mr. Harding, we just bought this place. Wanted to say hello. I nodded. Take good care of it. It's got a lot of memories. She tilted her head. You built it yourself? I smiled faintly. In more ways than one. As I walked back to my truck, the autumn wind carried the faintest trace of gasoline from the street, a ghost of what might have been. But for the first time in a long while, I didn't smell danger. I smelled freedom. Still, something deep inside me whispered that this story wasn't done. Not yet. Because Melissa wasn't the kind of woman who accepted defeat quietly. And as I turned the ignition, I couldn't shake the feeling that the next knock on my door wouldn't be a friendly one. It came just after midnight, that heavy, deliberate knock that doesn't belong to a neighbor or a friend. 3 slow thuds that made the walls seem to lean closer. Eddie stirred in the next room. You expecting someone, Tom? Not at this hour. I pushed back my blanket and went to the door. Outside, the world was a pool of silver fog, the kind that muffles sound but not dread. When I opened it, Lucas stood there, soaked through, eyes red. She's gone, Grandpa. Gone where? He swallowed hard. Mom, she packed what she could, said she was driving to Derek's cabin near the river. But something's wrong. I stepped onto the porch. What happened? She called me an hour ago, crying, said, he's not who I thought he was. Then the line went dead. The fog thickened around us, swallowing the glow of the streetlight. I felt that old ache in my chest. Not the fear of losing a house this time, but of losing what little family I had left. I grabbed my coat and keys. Get in the truck. The road to the river twisted through the woods like an old scar. Branches scraped the windshield as we drove, headlights cutting through the mist. Lucas sat silent beside me, fingers clenched in his lap. I could feel the tremor in him, that mix of guilt and worry that only a kid could carry. When we reached the turnoff, the cabin came into view. Derek's truck was parked crooked, one door hanging open. A light flickered inside. Stay here, I told Lucas. He nodded, too scared to argue. The air smelled like wet pine and smoke. Not gasoline this time. Cigarette smoke, sharp and bitter. I stepped onto the porch and pushed the door open. Melissa sat at the table, mascara streaked, a half-empty bottle of wine beside her. Derek paced in the corner, phone pressed to his ear. When he saw me, his face twisted. You've got some nerve showing up here. I'm not here for you, I said. Lucas was worried. Melissa looked up, her voice slurred but clear enough. He took everything, Tom. The money, the contracts. He was using me. Derek slammed the phone down. Don't listen to her. She's drunk. She's scared, I said. There's a difference. He took a step closer, shoulders squared. You think you've won because you sold that damn house? You ruined everything. I held his gaze. No, Derek. You ruined it the second you thought you could steal what you didn't earn. For a moment, I thought he might hit me. Then he laughed, a cold, hollow sound. You're old, weak. You think anyone's going to believe your version? I reached into my jacket and pulled out my phone. Maybe the police will, especially when they hear the voicemail you just left your boss about hiding the paperwork. His grin faltered. Melissa looked between us, sobbing now. You told me you'd fix everything. You said he'd be gone. He turned on her, voice sharp. Shut up, Melissa. She flinched. That was all I needed to see. Lucas is outside, I said quietly. You should see him before the cops do. Her eyes widened. Cops? They're on their way. I'd texted Officer Mills the address before leaving Eddie's. Derek lunged for me, but years of wrenching engines had left me stronger than he expected. I sidestepped, grabbed his arm, and shoved him against the wall just as headlights flashed through the window, patrol cars pulling in. He went still. The fight drained from him like oil from a cracked pan. When the officers entered, Melissa broke down completely. "It was him," she sobbed. "He forged the papers. He told me we'd be rich." Derek didn't argue. They cuffed him without a word. Outside, the fog was lifting. Lucas stood by the truck, eyes wide, watching as they led Derek away. Melissa followed, wrapped in a blanket, not looking at either of us. "Grandpa," Lucas whispered, "what's going to happen to her?" "She'll have to face what she's done," I said. "We all do, sooner or later." He nodded, then did something that caught me off guard. He took my hand, just held it there, like a kid again. "I'm sorry for everything," he said. "I know, kiddo." The police lights faded down the road, and for the first time in months, I felt the silence settle right. Not heavy, clean. The next few weeks moved slow, papers to sign, statements to give, questions to answer. Turned out Derek had been forging estate documents under my son's name for months, using Melissa as cover. She'd be facing charges too, but Mills told me the DA was recommending leniency if she cooperated. I didn't gloat. I didn't even feel triumphant. Mostly, I felt tired, like a man who's finished a long shift and finally sets down the wrench. One afternoon, Lucas stopped by the garage apartment carrying a cardboard box. "What's that?" I asked. He smiled shyly. "Stuff from the old house. Thought you might want it." Inside were small things: Mary's cookbook, Mark's baseball glove, a picture of me holding a baby Lucas in the backyard. But beneath them was something else, a folded sheet of paper. "Found it behind the dresser," he said. It was another letter, Mark again. "Dad, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get the chance to tell you what I meant to. I know you worry about being alone, but you're not. You built something solid. Me, Lucas, the way we think, the way we love. That doesn't die when I do. Promise me you'll keep living like the man who taught me everything that mattered." The words hit like a hammer wrapped in velvet. I looked at Lucas, and for the first time in years, I saw my son's eyes looking back. "You know," I said softly, "your dad never stopped believing in you." He blinked hard. "Then I'll try to be someone he'd be proud of." "You already are," I said. That evening, we drove out to Miller's Lake. The air was cool, the water still. Lucas built a small fire near the shore. We sat there watching the sparks drift up into the dark. "What'll you do now?" he asked. "Maybe fix up Eddie's old place," I said. "Maybe travel. Mary always wanted to see the Grand Canyon. Guess it's my turn." He smiled. "You'd really go?" "I've spent too long waiting for permission to live. Time to start again." We sat in silence a while, then Lucas said quietly, "Grandpa, you think people can change?" I stared at the fire. "I think they can remember who they used to be. That's close enough." He nodded, tossing another stick into the flames. The smoke curled upward, carrying the faintest scent of pine and something sweeter. Maybe hope. When we finally left, the fire still burned low and steady, like a heartbeat. That night, back in Eddie's apartment, I lay awake listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the echo of my father's old saying about gasoline and temper. Maybe he was right. Fire destroys, but it also clears the ground for something new. I thought about Mark's letter, about Lucas's hand gripping mine in the fog, about Melissa's face when she realized she'd lost everything that wasn't hers to begin with. And somewhere between exhaustion and peace, I realized the truth I'd been running from all along. It was never the house I was fighting for. It was my name, my dignity, my place in the story, and I'd won that back the only way a Harding ever could, by standing firm when everyone else expected me to fall. The first morning after everything ended, I woke up before the sun. The world outside was quiet, still damp from a night of rain. I sat up slowly, joints protesting the way old engines do when you turn them after years of rust. But the pain didn't bother me anymore. It felt like proof that I was still here. Coffee first. Always coffee. The smell filled Eddie's little kitchen, rising like forgiveness. I took my mug out to the porch and sat on the steps, watching the light spread across the fields. For the first time in years, I didn't have to think about who was inside my house, or what I might lose next. I could just sit, just breathe. People say revenge feels sweet. They're wrong. It feels heavy, like a full tank of fuel on a long drive home. Useful, necessary, but not the destination. What came after? That quiet peace. That was the sweetness. 3 weeks passed before I saw Melissa again. I was at the courthouse, signing the final paperwork to transfer the sale proceeds into my account. The clerk handed me the check, and there she was in the hallway. Thinner, hair pulled back, a shadow of herself. She froze when she saw me. I expected anger, maybe blame, but instead, she looked tired. "Tom," she whispered, "I didn't know he was forging those papers. I swear." I didn't answer right away. She glanced down, twisting her hands. "They're letting me do community service instead of jail time. I'll pay restitution, someday." Her voice cracked on that word, someday. I studied her face, this woman who'd turned my son's home into a battlefield. But under the bitterness, I saw something new. Shame, regret, maybe even a hint of the girl Mark had once loved. "I don't hate you, Melissa," I said quietly. "I just hate what you became trying to survive." She blinked. "You don't hate me?" "Hating you would keep me stuck where you left me. I've got better places to be." She nodded slowly, tears sliding down. "Tell Lucas I'm sorry." "I think he already knows." She turned and walked away. And just like that, the weight I'd been carrying loosened its grip. That evening I drove out to the lake again. The air smelled of pine and damp earth. Lucas was waiting on the dock, 2 fishing poles leaning beside him. "Thought you might come," he said, smiling. "Figured you'd get bored fishing alone." "Never bored," he said, "just lonely." We sat side by side, casting our lines into the still water. The sun slipped behind the trees, setting the sky on fire. For a long while, we didn't talk. We didn't have to. Every ripple, every breeze carried more truth than words could. Then he said, "I went to see Mom yesterday. She looked different." "She will be," I said. "Life has a way of sanding people down until only the truth's left." He nodded thoughtfully. "She asked about you." I chuckled. "That must have been awkward." "She said you were kinder than she deserved." I looked at him. "Everyone deserves a second chance, Lucas, but it's up to them to make something of it." He reeled in his line, setting the pole down. "I've been thinking about college. Maybe trade school, actually. Engineering. Something hands-on, like Dad." I felt my throat tighten. "He'd like that." "Yeah," he said softly. "He would." The stars started to show through the purple haze of dusk. Crickets took over where the birds left off. "Grandpa." "Yeah?" He hesitated. "What are you going to do now?" I smiled at the reflection of the moon on the water. "Build something new. Doesn't have to be big, just mine." A month later, I bought a small cottage 2 towns over. White siding, blue shutters, a garage just wide enough for one old Chevy, and a workbench. It wasn't much, but it was honest. When I first walked in, the floors creaked under my boots like the house was saying, "Welcome home." Eddie helped me move what little I owned. "You really gonna start fixing cars again?" he asked, watching me unpack my tools. "Maybe 1 or 2, I said. "Keep my hands busy." He laughed. "You can't sit still, can you?" "Not while there's work to be done," I said. "Besides, old engines and old men, we both need something to keep us running." That night, I hung the photo of Mary and Mark above the mantel. The 3 of us at the lake, wind in our hair, laughter frozen in time. I whispered, "We made it through, love. We really did." And for a second, maybe it was the wind through the cracked window, maybe something more, I swear I heard her voice answer, "About time." Lucas started visiting on weekends. He'd bring takeout and stories from his new job at a mechanic shop downtown. He was learning fast. Said he liked the smell of grease and metal, that it reminded him of me. "You planning to stay there long term?" I asked one night. "Maybe, but I've been saving." "Thought about buying a plot near the lake. Build something of my own." "Good," I said. "Just make sure it's built on truth. It lasts longer that way." He smiled. "You sound like Dad." I grinned. "I take that as a compliment." Spring came early that year. Wildflowers pushed through the cracks in the driveway, stubborn and bright. I started volunteering at the Veterans Workshop downtown, teaching young guys how to rebuild engines. Most days I came home with oil on my hands and a kind of peace that no amount of money could buy. Sometimes I'd sit by the window at night and think about the house on Maple Avenue. Someone else lived there now, a family with kids. I'd see them sometimes when I drove past. The porch light was always on. Laughter spilled through the windows instead of shouting. That made me smile. The place deserved that. And maybe, just maybe, so did I. One evening, I got a letter in the mail. Neat handwriting, the kind that tried to look confident. It was from Melissa. "Dear Tom, I'm in a program now. Counseling, work placement. They let me help at a shelter for families who've lost everything. Guess I know what that feels like. I'm writing to thank you. Not for forgiveness, but for not giving up on Lucas. You saved him from becoming bitter like me. Maybe one day, when I'm better, I'll thank you in person. Until then, I wish you peace." Melissa? I sat there a long while after reading it, the evening light fading across the page. Then I folded it carefully and tucked it behind Mark's photo. Forgiveness wasn't a switch you flipped. It was a quiet, patient thing that took root when you stopped feeding anger. And for the first time, I understood what peace really was. It wasn't the silence after revenge. It was the sound of letting go. Summer rolled in with long, golden evenings. Lucas and I spent most Sundays at Miller's Lake, fixing up an old rowboat I'd found rotting behind Eddie's shop. One afternoon, after a few hours of sanding and painting, he asked, "Grandpa, do you ever miss the old house?" I looked out over the water, the reflection of the clouds rippling in the gentle current. "Sometimes. But homes aren't just wood and nails, they're people. And the right people, they stay with you no matter where you end up." He smiled. "Then I guess I'm home." The wind shifted, carrying the smell of pine and summer rain. I felt something ease inside me, the last bit of anger, finally dissolving into the air. "Yeah," I said softly, watching the sun dip behind the trees. "So am I. It took 72 years, a broken family, a burned bridge, and a house sold out from under the wrong hands for me to finally understand one simple truth. You can lose everything you own and still have everything that matters. My name is Tom Harding. I built homes. I lost one. But in the ashes of it all, I found myself. And that's worth more than any deed."